So
Cool.
yeah, if you could just give a brief introduction for my listeners who might not know you yet. Who are you? Where are you based? What do you do?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Chase. So my name is Pop Buchanan. I'm the host of the Sober is Dope podcast. I'm 8 years sober, and I'm a resident of New York City, college graduate, business student, hip hop artist, businessman. And I decided to devote my life to sharing my story of recovery in hopes to reach in other people. And the Sober is Dope podcast is 2 years old. The company is about 8 years old, and I decided to come out publicly and start sharing my story on the platform via podcast because I felt like if I could duplicate the effects that we have in meetings where we share our stories to a small group, I could affect a large amount of people by sharing it with the world. And this goes a long way of breaking the stigma of addiction and stuff like that. So I wanted to just share my story of recovery. Addiction was a dark period in my life. I think it's a dark period in anyone's life who suffered with any form of an addiction. And in my case, I wanted to really remind the world and put the world on notice of that specific form of darkness to let people know that it's a better way to live and you shouldn't be ashamed of your addiction and it's okay to ask for help.
Awesome. And congratulations on, you said 8 years sober?
Yes, yes.
Very
eight
nice.
years
Yeah.
sober. The my sober date is December 12th, 2000, December 15, 2012. So I just recently celebrated my 8 years on December 15th.
Excellent. Excellent. Congrats. And
Thank you.
if you wouldn't mind sharing a bit about during your drinking days, I heard on your podcast that you did go through rehab. So if you could just give a brief story of kind of, I guess, your drinking saga. When did you kind of start drinking? When did it become a real big problem? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, as a high school, I guess to give you guys the crash version, in high school, I was just a regular high school kid experimenting with beers, 40s, and pot here and there. I think it became problematic when I went to college. I had a lot of episodes in college related to drinking. I remember my first episode as I interrupted a comedy show. Me and my friend, for some reason, we went and bought a large bottle of trigger warning Bacardi, and it was just me, him, and myself, and we drank the whole thing, and we just literally lost our mind. I think the first time I blacked out, and then we interrupted this comedy show. It's a comedian on stage. We jump on stage. It's this big thing. I fall off stage. I fight with my friend. And then from there, I noticed that, well, maybe I just thought I just drank too much, right? I didn't really realize that the effect of that was because I had an allergy with alcohol, right? That I'm allergic to it, that, I shouldn't, drinking is not for me. But that, I didn't really come to that realization till years later, right? So I went to college like every other person, dated, did my thing. But it wasn't until I got out of college, I was around 25 years old, I got my own place. So I was in real estate, doing really well at a young age. I had a brownstone in Brooklyn. I was like 24, 25. I inherited this brownstone because of my business. And I just had this big building and I just started like really living this kind of like real estate financial lifestyle where I didn't really have a lot of structure. But because I graduated with a business degree, I was really good at what I did. And I just really lived that kind of fast money lifestyle. And being a hip hop artist, that played into it also because my older brother was in the music industry, my younger brother and myself. And so my whole family was kind of involved in the hip hop community. Um, and with that comes the whole clubbing, partying, models, bottles, that whole kind of thing, the flashing lights, the Puff Daddy kind of energy back then. It's all about the Benjamins type stuff. Let's go pop some bottles. The problem was at the end of the party, I'll still be addicted and start drinking the next morning just to feel better. And that kind of cycle triggered throughout the years. In the interest of time, I'll fast forward and say my addiction became extremely chronic when around, I think, 2007, when the real estate market crashed. So all of the money I was accustomed to making didn't really work out for me anymore. I was young, so I didn't really bounce back. I was in this party mode, so that was interfering with stuff. And then I went through a breakup that really triggered me in a weird way. And it wasn't until later that I understood the connection between grief, loss, and addiction, and mental health and depression and addiction. So that's important to understand. But from that breakup led a really long binge, and I really started drinking really hard. Like I took it really hard. I think that and the combination of how everyone responded to me when I wasn't making the money that I was usually accustomed to making, I felt kind of abandoned and betrayed. Like, the last 3 or 4 years, I'm like 2, 3 years, I've been paying for everything, doing all of this stuff for people. And now things are not working out. Everyone's judging me. You need to do this. You need to do that. I think I needed time to just figure myself out, but the alcohol just was getting in the way. So long story short, after the breakup, I met a new girl. She was going through some stuff. We kind of like rebounded together in a cool way, but that also came with another avalanche of partying and just that rock star life. But we young, beautiful in Brooklyn, New York. We at the Brownstone. We all doing it with all the entertainment, either with writers, entertainers, doing business people. We're all doing a lot. We're wearing a lot of hats, but eventually it just became really bad. Once I lost the Brownstone because of the drinking and the party, and eventually I lost that, right? I never really got over the depression of the original breakup. And although I was in love with my new girlfriend, it was just the drinking became problematic. Long story short, I lost that, went back to live with my mother. My girlfriend went to rehab, or went to her family in Massachusetts and did her thing. And I was just pretty much with my mom. And then my mother and I got into a fight. I drank one night too much and then fought with my mom. And my mom is like my hero. She's beautiful. I lost my father when I was younger. So my relationship with my mother was extremely important to me. And when I had that fight with her, really that really was the beginning of the end. She was kind of like, it wasn't a physical fight, it was a verbal fight. We just argued, but my thing was I never really argued with my mom, and I never really exploded. I think it was a lot of the pent-up anger from the relationship, losing the place, having this addiction on my shoulders. Like at the time, I still didn't understand that I was allergic. I didn't understand none of the signs of addiction or anything. I don't think anyone does at that age who's just naturally drinking. You have to kind of get to a point, hopefully, to where that's a revelation to you. Most people don't get the memo. I never really understood it was an actual connection between the alcohol and me just being allergic to it that was creating all of these problems. So my mom was like, you can't stay here. And I'm like, well, where I'm going to go? And long story short, she was like, I don't care. You got to figure it out. I couldn't go back to Boston to be with my girl. I lost my place. So for this limbo period, I'm pretty much homeless for 2 weeks, first time in my life. College kid, went from making almost $25,000 a month to being homeless, right? And then I had one friend who let me kind of like crash on their floor, not even, the floor, when they were home at the long night. He was a DJ, so you can imagine that. Like I was roaming around just waiting for him to come back home. And I did this for about a week. And then one day I was just killing time. And it was early in the morning. He had an early meeting. So he's like, you got to get up and go. I'm like, where I'm going to go? It's freezing outside. It's the middle of December. So I go outside, I'm walking, and, I just really was at rock bottom. At the point, I had no money. I started feeling sick because I had no way of getting any alcohol. I really needed to drink because if I didn't, it would have just been I was getting sick. And the only thing that would make me feel better was more alcohol, right? So I started asking people for money, which I never tried before, right? That was like in New York City. You always see people anywhere. You see people outside, and that wasn't my deal, man. I always was the guy with the money and stuff. So I just was like, excuse me, sir, do you mind? Is there any way you could let me borrow $1? I wasn't good at it. They're looking at me. Now, at the time, I was really damaged on the inside, right? I didn't feel well. I was sick. I was skinny. I was emaciated. But to the average person, I looked pretty normal, right? I wasn't like homeless to the, traditional homeless. I just was displaced, but homeless, but still appeared to be a normal 27-year-old kid, the man. So long story short, I just kept asking a few people, got a bunch of no's, and then somebody threw a cigarette. Was smoking, somebody just throws the cigarette on the floor, and I looked at the cigarette, and I went to go get it, and that was the point of transformation for me. So I said to myself, if you go grab that cigarette, it's all you get. You're trading in something that's bigger. It's integrity. It's ancestral. It's spiritual. There's a lot of things you can't do. That's not going to go well for you if you go grab that damn cigarette off the floor. And I just broke down, man. I broke down. I got on my knees and I started crying and I started praying. Now, I come from a really cool family. Everyone is pretty intelligent, beautiful people. My brother was a Roman Catholic priest at the time, a very powerful priest. And I went through the church. I knew about God. I was an altar boy. I was the God. I was kind of like the go-to guy if you needed spiritual guidance, right? I just happened to be having this problem. So I was aware of who God, what God was, and that God existed. So I got on my knees, broke down, and just gave my life back to God, man. I realized that I did not want to play in this game no more. And the number one thing that I realized at that time was that the addiction is insidious and evil, and it's dark and it's gripping, and it will destroy you and try to kill you. And it attacks the brain, the mind, and eventually the spirit. And that's when I realized what we call in the church something called spiritual warfare. And I said, this is warfare. And I have to go back to God. I have to go home now. And I prayed to God. And my exact prayer was, God, I'm captured. The devil has captured me. My life is ruined. I'm in trouble. Can you please help me? And I feel like there's something to say in the movies where they say you have to invite, you have to sometimes invite the God in, I think my temple and my spirit was so disconnected for so long that I had to actually surrender and say the words and make this public spectacle, because I don't care who's around. And to everyone else, they're like, who the hell, why is this kid on the floor crying and praying? But I didn't even see anything else. That it was just me, the sun, the morning, rush hour, sitting in the middle of the street in Brooklyn, praying to God for a miracle. And then I heard a voice, which really sounds kind of crazy, but I'm happy I did all of the spiritual work over the years. So I was connected to this heightened higher power in me. And I heard a voice that just said, get on a train, go to Manhattan, 14th Street Hospital. Mm. And I knew it was a Catholic hospital in Manhattan on 14th Street because I had got injured years prior related to alcohol. And I was in Manhattan when it happened, and they took me to this hospital. And being a Catholic, I said, that's my Hail Mary. I may have to just listen to this voice. And I went. And when I went to the hospital, I met this beautiful nurse who was there. I was in the detox. I think it was St. Luke's or St. Vincent. The one is closed now. It was on 14th Street. I went to their detox unit. I had nothing on me, no wallet, no phone. The voice in my head said, you're going to have to jump the turnstile and all of that. I jumped the turnstile, rolled the train there, broke, had nothing. And I sat there and I told the people, I really need help. I really want, I messed up. And they're like, well, what, you're young. What the hell could you be? What problems could you really like? What's wrong? And I'm like, I'm dying. I'm dying. I'm telling you, I drank for 3 years straight. I didn't eat. I didn't do anything. My nervous system is shot. I'm nervous all the time. I can't sit still. I felt like I was going into shock. They took my vitals and the nurse was like, yo, you got a heart attack at any moment. What the hell are you on? Like, what have you been doing? And I just think it was neglect for so long, right? Long story short, I stayed there all night, and it wasn't until they was about to close that I went to the nurse and said, what's going on? Why no one's helping me? She said, we're trying to figure out a way to get you insurance. You have no insurance or anything. You don't have we have to get all your paperwork, find you in a system. And I'm like, well, what's going to happen if you close? It was like, you're going to have to come back tomorrow. And I just lost it. I mean, I broke down crying. I was just so upset, because I'm trying to explain to these people I really want help, and there's no way in hell I'm leaving this place. Like, y'all, you will have to commit me tonight. Like, you have to either arrest me or something. I was really upset. And I'm sitting there, I'm upset, I'm crying, I'm praying. I asked the lady to pray with me and all of this stuff. So the nurse had mercy on me. She said, you know what, I'm gonna try to do something. It's untraditional, I never really do it, but I'm gonna make a phone call. So she made a phone call. So, I see this man come off the elevator. It's an older gentleman. He has a cowboy hat on and all of this. He looks distinguished, right? He comes over to me, and the nurse go, here's the kid, here's Joseph, right? And so I'm sitting there, and he's like, kid, what's your deal? I said, I'm allergic. No, I said, I have a drinking problem, and I need to get help, and I don't want to die, right? I was very clear. I said, I don't want to die, and I'm here to try to get help, and no one's helping me. They talking about insurance or something. And he goes, kid, a lot of people come in here every day and waste our time, right? Now, if I try to help you, can you make a commitment that you're going to really do the right thing? Are you going to really fly straight? And I said to him, I promise you, if you can help me in any way, I'm gonna fly straight. I want to change my life. I'm committed to changing my life. And then he goes, all right, you know what, kid? I'm giving you someone else's bed. It seemed like we have an extra bed. I don't want you to waste my time, but today's your lucky day. Go get your scrubs and go upstairs. And that was them admitting me into the detox unit under medical emergency, bypassing the insurance process. Wow. And that was the beginning of the Sober is Dope story, because at that point, I was like, I'm 100% willing to go on this journey. And when I got on my knees in Brooklyn, I was extremely certain when I spoke to God that I was willing to change. It wasn't like I wasn't going to bullshit God with the biggest prayer of my life, the biggest plea. I gave God my biggest case, and God answered my prayer. I think what I felt was like God sent everything, all of the angels, all of the heavenly host, everything came to my rescue at that point to accompany me. And I did everything at that point. I stayed in detox for 5 days. When you leave detox, they give you an option to either go home or try to go on to further treatment. I told them I don't want to leave. I want to go into the most intensive thing that they have. So they put me into an outpatient rehabilitation program where I would live in like a 3-quarter house that was devoted to sobriety. So that means I would have to live in this place and go to this treatment, take drug tests, blood test every day, and urine tests to make sure I was sober and work the programs. I did that for a year, graduated with flying colors. I did AA. I did therapy, psychiatry, and all of these things. And 8 years later, I'm here sharing my story with the world, totally healed, have no desire to drink. And they say when you have a psychic change, you can have a DNA change. And I think that allergy that was partially a DNA thing for any addict that has that problem, I was able to transmute that into something more better, right? Like I don't have that issue no more. Like I erased that generational curse or whatever the hell you want to call addiction. I got rid of that nasty thing, that vicious cycle, and I'm here today. So that's my story.
Wow. That's an incredible story. Now, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, you really went from the highest to the highs to really rock bottom. And right. It's interesting to hear a story like that. And you had one of those like coming to Jesus moments. And I know there's like a scientific word for that, which I'm forgetting right now. But yeah, wow. Yeah, and 8 years now down this new path. And so you've gotten into the recovery community. And this has become your life and your business. When did you decide that you're not just going to kind of go through your own recovery, but you're then going to make this your life and career, and you're going to share your story and try to help others?
From that day, from when they let me go on that elevator, I realized it was it was so much mercy that the universe and God and the people and the doctors and everyone had on me, that I just said, you have to, one, pay it forward. Two, you have to, because if you don't, I knew that it would be millions of kids that's going to come after me, millions of adults that's going to come after me. And it's going to be day in and day out. It's never that the vicious cycle, corporate interests, you're dealing with big business, commercialism, and corporate versus people's lives, right? So you have these billion-dollar liquor companies that's going to keep pushing liquor out. They're going to package it very beautiful, knowing that it's poison in there, and it's going to be ripping people apart. Then you have these big companies like the Sackler family and Bear, who put out all these Percocets and all the opioids and stuff like that, and hooked a whole generation of people. And then that boosted heroin and pandemic and the fentanyl and all of this stuff. And you have this war on drugs, and people try to stigmatize that and don't realize that alcohol is just as bad. For me, alcohol was no different from heroin. I swear, look, you addicted. This stuff is gripping. We know it's a neurotoxin. We know it's a depressant. There's nothing healthy about it. So I decided that this is a real thing. And, I could keep it to myself, but it would be unfair if I didn't share my story with the world. So I decided that, I have to, because like I said, Sober is Dope is about 8 years old. My friends and I in rehab, I came up with it in rehab because I used to always say everything was dope. Like my music, I'd be like, yo, that's dope. That song is dope. And one day I was like, sober is dope. They was like, sober is dope. Like sober. And that was our thing. So we used to just go around saying that. And they was like, that's Mr. Sober's dope over there. He raps and all of that. And I'll be rapping about stuff. And long story short, that was it. And then one day, like I said, about 2 years ago, I just said, I want to start telling my story. And that's when I started the podcast, right? So the speaking side of it, I started 2 years ago. The clothing and all of that, we started prior. But, and this was more, so at first I thought if I could put it on a shirt and people say, that's cool, what's that? Then it'll make I could start telling my story. I wanted to create a conversation around the concept, right? I wanted it to be everywhere. And then I wanted also something that was kind of cool for kids because, the younger generation, I didn't want them to make the same mistakes I did, thinking that to be an artist or to be a creative, you have to drink and drug to be inspired, right? My friend Martin John Garcia from the Recover Yourself podcast, we did an episode called Creativity and Recovery, right? Where we was talking about breaking the myth of the creative needing to be intoxicated to find inspiration.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, that's bullshit because the most productive people in the world are sober.
Yeah.
Right. Period. Like you don't get to become a billionaire and a high producing person if you're living the life of addiction. It doesn't work. You have to, there's no way. How are you going to wake up? You have CEOs waking up at 3:00 in the morning running multi-billion-dollar corporations. I don't think you could do that if you're drinking whiskey all night. Right. So that's the thing. And that's why I wanted to tell the story. And that's where I decided to look, you can't share the blessing. You can't like keep the blessing. You have to share the blessing.
Right. Yeah. And so I've been in this community for about a year, having gone through my own recovery process. And one thing I wanted to talk to you about today is kind of the lack of diversity that I've noticed, because it is, I mean, at least that I've seen, because for me, it's been, I've met a lot of really great people and it's a very supportive community on the most part. But I've been kind of looking around. I'm like, I feel like there's a lot of people that aren't really well represented sort of in this community. Their voices kind of aren't heard. Would you have an opinion on that? I mean, why do you think there is such a lack of diversity? And
yeah. When you say, you talking about in like the social community, the social media community, or just in like what aspect?
Yeah, I would say on social media, in terms of, the loudest voices that I'm aware of in the sobriety recovery community tend to be white people, to be honest.
Yeah. You know what I noticed too? All right. So one thing is a lot of people got on top of the trend of, it started mainly with recovery centers. So if you go back about 10 years, the only people online who was publishing materials about recovery would be either SAMHSA, the National Institute of Alcohol, or alcohol.org, or all of these other recovery centers, right? And it was like, again, corporate interest in the conversation, right? So you have them putting out articles and stuff on recovery and all of this stuff, but it's just to railroad people into their programs without, a lot of companies wasn't always vested in really seeing people recover. They was just trying to make money off people through insurance. Like we call that recovery scams. And you see that a lot. And then they had money to flood the internet. And I guess what they was trying to attract was people with a little bit more affluence of money to pay for their programs, right? So they would probably market to more white people or what would be perceived as people of a different economic bracket, right? Knowing that's far from the truth, because one thing we know about recovery, there's no race in recovery, right? It's never like that. I swear, as an addict, I'm one, we all have that in common. That's our unifying community, right? I don't see color when it comes to addiction. I just see a human condition. But that's when you see it now. So I say that to say that a lot of people had a head start on capitalizing off of the trend of sobriety through social media. So, whoever the people were on Instagram talking about this when it first opened, they'll be big right now. The people who got into the podcast now there's a lot of people who genuinely care, like, that really just want to do podcasts like I'm doing it, but they just started probably 8 years ago, right? So now they're seeing that because it's trending, you're seeing these amplified voices. But I think social media sometimes tend to be bias on how they distribute recovery content, because I know hundreds of recovery people in the Black community, in the Latino community, in the LGBTQ community, and all of that. I know there's hundreds of different podcasts out there for people all over the place that should be represented, hundreds of profiles, right? But if you're not doing ad spends, if you wasn't grandfathered in, if you're not, it's hard to get. So the algorithm kind of suffocates the image of what they want recovery to be. So for example, when I first, Sober's Dope is my company. So I've been talking about it for a while, but there's a hashtag, right? So I was hashtagging less about my interests, and I was posting for years, just, about addiction and sober and these basic hashtags. Mm-hmm. But because I was out there was people posting Sober's Dope hashtags. When I went to my hashtag, it was unrepresented. It was like, this is my company. And it's just like, I seen all of this other stuff. And I'm like, yo, none of these people are Sober's Dope though. Like, this is not, even on TikTok. Like, I recently got on TikTok and they had the Sober's Dope hashtag and it's like 3.5 million. And it's all these people up there like Sober's Dope. And I'm like, okay, well, but they're not, it's nothing wrong with that. That's cool that somehow subconsciously the name and everything has an effect on people. But my thing is, if I think that, especially me as a Black man that's dealing with recovery, I don't tailor my message for a specific community because I'm Black. I just speak about recovery. I post it on my personal Facebook page, and I talk to my family, my friend, everyone around me are now aware of the dangers of addiction because of how I approached it, with this open-hearted, just, this is something that needs to be put out there. And I think it's time. In time, you will see the people that's really vested will win. So what you're seeing now, you keep working 10 years from now. Well, not even, we like to say 10 days, right? In my crew, 10 days. That means a significant amount of time we could, squeeze into this small time frame. But, you give it a year or two from now, you'll start to see, because now that sobriety and addiction and the pandemic, it's a human thing. And I think that the image of, and I'm really careful with this because it never really bothered me when I see how social media kind of showcases what sobriety looks like. It usually favors white women a lot. I notice a lot, like it's really hot. But that's because I think another thing too, they really kick ass on how they market and how they put their stuff together, and their community's tight. So their presentation is always tight. Like, it looks fun. And they got the tea. It looks like if Martha Stewart and and Walmart came together to do a fly, artistic expression from a female perspective was in the Starbucks cafe or what's a bride. It's hot. It's cute. It looks good. It's trending. But when we get down to the brass tacks of what it really means to be in recovery, you have to be about that work. And either you're going to be in there for the long run, or you're going to just be someone who's following a trend. Just like some of these recovery centers, you see that you call these people up, 90% of them are rude. Not 90, a large percent of them are rude sometimes. Like, I just cold call because people come to me and I was like, where are you? I'm in Delaware. I'm just using this example. I'll call a recovery center in Delaware trying to ask questions. They're not really being as welcoming as I think they need to be for someone who may be calling that's addicted. I'm like, why do you have an attitude? Why can't you answer my questions? Why are you asking me about insurance before you ask her? Like, it was all of these things I see that needs to be corrected in the recovery community, right? Like, it's cool to be trending, but it shouldn't be trending for people that's in sobriety. It should be trending for addicts who need recovery, right? That's what I want to see more of. That's underrepresented, right? They make the sobriety look so beautiful, and it just removes the person that's in addiction. Kind of seems unattainable to some people. Like, oh man, that's them over there. That can never be me. But we have to start showing the good, bad, and ugly. That's why I tell my story a lot, right? Because everything online for me always looked magnificent. I got expensive music videos out there. I used to model. Everything, like my whole social media presence before I even started talking about sobriety, just looked normal. I just happened to be a person in recovery, right? I don't have a reference point in my past where I look like I was totally at rock bottom. Like, you know, I have some pictures where I look a little rough. I had a rough night party. We party hard, you know, girls and guys, we go 2-3 days straight without sleep. We partying. The point I'm trying to say is that I think that what's not underrepresented is the actual addicts in the community and the actual people in recovery. That's real. And I think that this is a call to action for people of color. This is a call for action for minority communities. Go out there and put your face on your healing, right? We need more people. So it's kind of like I'm taking ownership. We know in recovery, you have to take accountability. So if we don't like something, then let's compete. You know, I spent close to $10,000 advertising Sober is Dope, never broke even or anything, right? Just on ad spends, just because I cared about the message, not because I wanted to make a profit. I didn't spend money on the clothing. I'm talking about trying to promote podcasts, trying to do this, trying to get the message, learning new things, trying to build platforms and systems and things failing. And I'm like, I'm not going to give up, right? Because I'm like, I have to play my part. And I have to compete with corporations. You got corporations doing sober stuff now. It's like, okay, so how the small guy gonna win? And what pisses me off is now the podcast community's open up to everyone now. So now it's no longer the sacred indie thing. Now it's like, okay, I got to compete with damn CBS
Rogan,
now.
yeah.
Like, Shout out to Joe Rogan, by the way. You know, Joe Rogan was one of the first people that really was talking about sobriety, and I thought that was cool. Yeah. And you know, he's chill as hell. You know, I love Joe Rogan, Tim Ferriss, James Altucher, Sean Stevenson, all of those guys. That was my crew way before I even started podcasting. I would listen to these guys and be inspired. But my thing is, I think another thing too, lastly, we have to just talk a little bit about like the imbalance between these corporate interests and like the liquor companies and stuff like that. That's where I think a lot of the lopsidedness comes from. And, you know, I want to see recovery be free to everyone. I don't want recovery to be like, you need to be a famous artist that could afford $50,000 a month to go to this beautiful place. You know, there should be some backdoor contingency. I think politicians should work with the liquor companies and the drug manufacturers for fallout when people get addicted to their products, and have subsidies and things put in place for when people need rehab. It shouldn't be this hard. I shouldn't have to sit in that place for 7 hours crying because I didn't have my ID and I didn't update my insurance, right? I had insurance, but I just didn't have all my information. It probably lapsed or something. They should have just said the kid, his vital and blood signs shows that he's addicted and need help. Let's get him help, figure it out later. And the reason why I'm passionate about that is I could care less about what social media is doing. I care less about what the public image is. And shout out to all the white people out there who's doing their thing in recovery. As long as the message is being spread, it's all good. The only thing I want balance in the imaging, right? I don't want it to be all about, like, when you go to Sober is Dope, you know that's my company. And I had to organically, what I call terraform my own hashtag back to our company. I said, okay, so if people is posting my thing, then let me just make sure they understand what Sober is Dope really is about. So now when you go on Sober is Dope, you see me there like this talking. You see, like, right. I'm like, I call them the Autobots. It's all my little Autobots. I'm out there like this, right? Yeah. On TikTok, you know, we like this on TikTok. So my thing is, it's all good, bro. And I think I don't want that to be discouraged. So if you're listening and you're in addiction, I'm telling you, the recovery community has no race. It doesn't discriminate. It's like, if you're an addict, you're an addict. We one community, one blood, white, black, red, whatever, blue, alien, doesn't matter. We're one people. And that's the message.
Yeah. And like you said, I mean, addiction is something that transcends socioeconomic background, race, gender, sexual preference, all these things. It affects everybody.
Everyone.
Yeah. How do we... No, I don't know if I don't want to, like, for us to try to bite off more than we can chew, but how do we sort of make recovery more accessible for everyone, not just on social media, but kind of in practice? But how do we just make it more accessible?
We have to talk about it. We have to be walking billboards. It's the only thing. So like, if like it has to be organic. It's a human thing. It's nothing else. What, I'm gonna run commercial ads, right? we see the commercial ads, the recovery people that come on 3:00 in the morning, the don't go it alone guy, which I love that guy, by the way. You remember he has the glasses on and the recovery Malibu commercial. He's like, you don't have to go it alone and all of that. That helped me because I remember we used to laugh like, go it alone, go it alone. We were drinking and stuff, go it alone. But years later, I used to say, yeah, he's right. I don't have to go it alone, right? The point is you have to be a walking billboard. That's why I'm rocking the Sober is Dope. It's like I'm not trying to get money. Like I'm a money guy. I come from like I know how to make money. My thing was it was like this is important, and I'm telling you it's not easy. So this is how we do it, and I'm gonna drop a jewel for you right now.
Okay.
There's a lot of people on the fence that's ashamed of their recovery. They're ashamed to share their story. They're embarrassed, right? I remember when I first got sober, some of my family, you know, mentors and stuff that was like, you know, I would go to a place, there'll be prominent people there. I'll have on my suit and I'll have like an AA book in my hand. They're like, yo, you know, you don't got to talk about all of that. As soon as they say, what do you do? I'm in rehab. I'm mad excited about it. I had a drink, you know, I knew that I could blow this person's mind in their arena. If I'm talking finances, spirituality, whatever, I didn't care. I just was going off of like, yo, I'm sober. Like this thing is crazy. It's exciting. And after a while, I made more friends by telling my truth than sitting there and trying to hide it. Right. So I remember that first influential environment I was in. It was a doctor and there was this other guy. He's a Harvard. One of the guys is a Harvard guy. There's another guy. And it was Christmas Day. It was like the 5th day I was in recovery because I got sober December 15, 2012. This was December 25th. I went to Manhattan, went to this mass, this Catholic mass. Afterwards, we went to this coffee shop. Everyone is there. It's calm. I'm sitting there. I'm dressed. And I remember one of my mentors saying, you know, you don't have to talk about the recovery thing if you don't need to, if you don't have to. And I was like, nah, I have to. I have to share my story, man. And then I remember one of the doctors came and said, is that what are you reading? I was like, this is called Came to Believe. This is a story from AA where a bunch of people write letters on how they found God through their sobriety and they came to believe. And the guy was like, oh my God, kid, I'm in AA. And then it was too prominent. Like, you know, these people was like old New York benefactors, like rich money. They look like Vanderbilts or something, right? They came over and said, you know, the lady was telling me my husband has been in recovery for over 50, 60 years. Like he's old people, right? And they was like, well, you know, and we all was sitting there talking about recovery and it blew the other people's mind because they was like, a few minutes ago, they was like, you don't have to talk about this. And and then from that day, I said, I don't have to be afraid. So this is a call to action. If you're out there, I know sometimes you may feel like for professional purposes, you may not want to talk about your recovery for business or personal reasons. But I'm going to tell you something. When you share it with the world, it adds a second layer of accountability, and that will help with your recovery. But at the same time, by sharing it, you spread the diversity, you spread the message, and this is how you create an organic buzz. Because now you have millions of people talking about it. So I want to shout out a few people. Jada Pinkett Smith, she's talking about it. If it's good enough for Jada Pinkett Smith, it should be good enough for you. Kendrick Lamar, best rapper in the world. Eminem's the next best rapper in the world. They're sober talking about it. My man Macklemore's my guy. Check out what happened. Macklemore recently said on Recovery Day that he relapsed recently. And he broke it down to us. So we all was doing the Recovery Day thing. We paid for in Canada. He was one of the guest speakers, and he came on to talk about all this recovery stuff. And he said, yo, I can't even bullshit you guys, man. I just recently, like, my wife went away. Things got over. I started using a bit. My wife came home, told me, get out. I had to go. I'm here at my parents' house. He broke the whole shit down. So even Macklemore had to come out again and say, I'm this sober spokesperson, and I just relapse. If it's good enough for Macklemore, it should be good enough for you, right? Well, Naomi Campbell, Dax Shepard, Natalie Portman. I had this whole series that I do about sober celebrities that I'm really like, if it's good, the celebrities is changing the stigma. They're talking about it. Chrissy Teigen just read our homegirl's book from Tempest. drink like a woman, or I forgot what it was exact name. It'll come back to me.
Yeah.
But Chrissy Teigen is 4 weeks sober, 5 weeks now.
Right.
And now that we're in dry January, there's people coming out all over the place and talking about it. So don't be ashamed. That's it. And there's no other way. You go spend $1 million on ad spend. Instagram is going to feature the most prettiest, most what they feel is post that has the most engagement, I should say. So another thing too, try to get engagement on your posts. If you're worrying about social media and in public, share your damn story. It's going to help save someone's life. Don't be selfish with it, because it's still a form of hiding. Right. And I think for addicts, I mean, you have the right to be anonymous. But the reason why people was anonymous back in the days was because they was crazy ignorant back in the days. So, you know, if you went out and told someone you was like, they treated addiction like you had SARS or something, or some type of disease. So this is like 2000, you know, it's 2021. Get over it. Like, talk about it, share it. It's not about you, it's bigger than you. And the only way we're going to get these corporations and people to actually stand up and take accountability for the poison that they manufacture is the people have to come back and share the evidence of what happened to them, right? So that's my deal. That's the best I could. That's the best that I have. What do you think? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, in terms of on kind of a macro level, I don't really know. I don't really have an answer.
Yeah.
But just to kind of, you know, piggyback on that, just on an individual level, I mean, me sharing my story, I'm only, you know, a year in, has
Congratulations,
done such, thank you. Yeah. It's done so much for my mental health, my personal growth. And it's just kind of put me in this kind of realm of growth and moving forward that has been like so empowering. It's just so much fun, you know. It's so much fun to wake up every day without a hangover and look in the mirror and be like, yes, like I'm about to bring my best self to the table every day. So, I mean, what you said, I mean, in terms of holding corporations accountable, I don't really know if I have much to add to that. I mean, we are kind of facing some pretty big, not enemies, but like forces and obstacles. But yeah, I mean, I would definitely encourage people, like you said, to just tell your story, get into that space of personal growth and self-discovery. It's incredibly empowering, and it's a lot of fun.
Right.
Yeah. So while I have you here too, I do want to ask you about, and I mean, we could take an entire episode on just this topic, but especially addiction in the Black community, because I know there perhaps are particular challenges and particular complications on that subject. So what would the particular challenges be facing the Black community when it comes to addiction, when it comes to recovery?
I think the challenge is going to be like just access to the right services. I think the problem again, my experience with addiction as a Black man and growing up in the Black community in Brooklyn, New York, was, you know, I think it was. I don't think people was. I don't think it's always an awareness of the extensive programs and services that's out there. I think there's somewhat of a disconnect in the marketing and the advertising with the services of these communities. Now, I'll tell you this much: everyone that's in the recovery community, like SAMHSA, and all of these different organizations and these big organizations, they really care. They treat recovery on a world basis, on a total human basis. So I think that we have to, I think that's the challenge of bridging the gap between the resources, the services. I also think it's a term that's restorative justice versus punitive justice, right? And I think that if we could incorporate more restorative justice in the justice system when it comes to addiction, how we treat people, how we treat addicts, how we stigmatize them. I think it should be automatic treatment for people that may have some issue with the law in reference to their addiction. I think that we need to attack addiction as a mental health aspect. I think we have to bridge those two worlds. So we know that there's a term called comorbid addiction, meaning that you can have a dual diagnosis. So it's a co-occurring diagnosis where you can have a mental health diagnosis alongside of a substance abuse misuse diagnosis, right? And we know that mental health fuels addiction, or addiction can fuel mental health issues. And then we have to bridge the gap there. And I think a lot of people deal with mental health. They use addiction to cope with the mental health problems, right? So we need to make services more available. I think the challenges, and if I could speak to Black people and poor people, whether you Black or not, I think that we're talking about a social economic thing also component, because I mean, it was white kids who grew up in Brooklyn. I had white friends. I had Spanish friends. It was like, if we was broke, we was broke, and we had the same limiting services, and we had to go through the same processes. It wasn't like if I went to the Human Resource Administration and I was white, I'll be treated differently. They'll just be like, where's your ID? Where's your paperwork? What's your deal? We're going to see what program fits you, right? But I think that's where I think the conversation has to start. We have to start by telling people, look, don't try to think that you could deal with your mental health on your own. It's okay to go to therapy. We have to start breaking the stigma of going to therapy, seeing a psychiatrist, taking medication. We also have to start looking at the effects of PTSD in Black neighborhoods, and that as a result of addiction. Because a study, I forgot where the study came from, but it's out there. So just research it. And I'm talking to anyone that may be listening. This study was legit. It was that they found that Black people in poor communities had higher levels of PTSD than soldiers that just came home from war. Right. And then you add that with a real stale kind of like perspective from criminal justice as far as the police is concerned, and how they treat people who's marginalized or maybe dealing with mental health, and cops shooting people who's actually have mental health issues, and shooting people who have disabilities that can't really express themselves properly, whether that's all of that is part of the conversation. So I think we as a community have to say, all right, what do we do to deal with addiction? How do we put ourselves in a better position? It starts with people like myself and you, but it also goes back to our health. What are we eating? Well, there's a connection between your diet and depression. There's a connection between diet and addiction, right? If you're eating sugary junk food all day and you have an addiction, you're gonna have more cravings. We have to learn more about our own brains. That's why I talk a lot about dopamine, serotonin, understanding your brain health, how to stay healthy, exercise, and just really living. And we have to release the power of addiction. We have to stop glorifying it in hip hop. We have to stop glorifying it. And I'm gonna tell you something. Again, going back to corporate interests, the radio stations and the people that own these radio stations are not Black. The people who own these record labels are not Black. Whatever they are, they're not. Or I'm talking about someone is above Puff Daddy, someone is above Jay-Z. It gets real, and then you get bonuses and incentives for pushing an agenda. So when you listen to this music and it's like, okay, the kids is talking about they like this and they talking about this drug and this drug. We was talking about shoot 'em up and hose this, hose that, and pop bottles this, pop bottles that, and smoking weed like it's going out of style. What happens to the next generation? It gets filtered down. So before we talk about the world, before we talk about corporate, before we talk about the man, before we talk about the Illuminati or whatever, all that garbage, right? I'm being real. We have to go back to us and say, now, are we going to start just saying it like it is? And I'm going to say it like it is. Alcohol is a neurotoxin, it's poison. You need to stop drinking if you're out there. There's no social reason to drink. You don't need it as a social lubricant. It's not going to make you more interesting. It's not going to improve your relationships or your sex life. It's just going to jam you up in the future. You don't need drugs to cope. What you need to do is really look into therapy, mental health, learn how to meditate, go back to God, pray, take care of yourself, and take it back to Eden, right? Eden is the metaphor for this way of living, this serenity, this peacefulness. We don't need all of this toxins, right? If you go back to Africa, we wasn't running around popping, drinking Hennessy and smoking and doing all of this crazy stuff and popping pills. We were eating off the land. We was in communication with nature. We were scientists. We were building pyramids and doing all of this great stuff. Let's go back to the basics, right? Let's reject the garbage. That's just I'm not talking about society. I'm talking about corporations. Let's stop supporting things that's toxic to our community, right? I don't know why everyone's promoting Hennessy sucks, by the way. And in the moment black people, no, I'm real. The moment I'm an OG, I'm 41. The moment black people started drinking Hennessy, they changed the formula. So the Hennessy you got now is not original Hennessy, man. I'm telling you, like I know, I was like, this is not Hennessy. I'm talking about, let's go back to the early, like the 80s, the early, like early 90s and all of that versus the 2000s. Like, this is not what they changed the formula up now. They make it, they more synthetic, more sugar to get you hooked. Newports and all of that. The Newports had glass, Clorox, ammonia, rat poison. Like, you could make a bomb out of a Newport. You know, what the hell are we smoking that for? And I never really talk about this stuff because I'm like, yo, I live the reality. The end result of me putting poison into my body is I almost went mad. I was almost walking on all fours, about to grab a cigarette off the floor at rock bottom, fighting with my mom, homeless, in the middle of the wilderness. That is no possible way anyone could prove that or disprove what I'm saying. It's like, it's toxic. You don't need it. And I think that's where the challenge is in Black communities, right? There's no one that's going to come and rescue us. We can't expect some company or some government agency or somebody to be more responsible than us with our own people. So as a Black man, I have to say, nah, the buck starts with me. It stops with me. That I could go intercede for help. Like, let me go to this organization. Let me go to the senators or the politicians and try to change this and that. But how the hell am I going to do that if I'm not the example? So now I'm going to rap sober. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to annoy everyone on my timeline. I'm not annoy them because I don't, that's not my intention. I don't post all day like, you need to stop drinking. I don't say that. Right. What I do say, if you have a drinking problem or you have this issue in your life, there's a better way. And I try to show people why sober is dope instead of saying it, right? You really hear me say sober is dope. You hear me talking about the benefits of sobriety all day, the benefits of dealing with mental health, explaining how mental health works with addiction and stuff, right? A lot of people don't know that. There's someone out there that's going to listen to this is going to say, damn, man, every time I get depressed, I drink a lot. Right. Or, when I got divorced, that's when I started drinking. So here's the science real quick, and I'll wrap it here. When you go through any type of loss, whether it's a loss of a job, whether it's a cop shooting one of your family members, whether us witnessing what happened to George Floyd, all of that, whether it's directly affecting us or indirectly affecting us, our brain process that as trauma. All forms of trauma leads to neuroplasticity in the brain. When your brain changes due to trauma, it usually changes for the worse. And that's when you develop a mental health component because your neurotransmitter hormones will fall to unhealthy levels. That registers as depression, anxiety, fear, anxiousness, PTSD, and all of this stuff. So when we go through these compound losses, it triggers extreme mental health, and then that triggers us finding relief through addiction. So the more that we could safeguard ourselves from the trauma and understand that I don't have to register or deal with this trauma in a negative way, I could process it. Also, unprocessed emotions. When you unprocess, so we had this thing in the Black community, yo, I'm good, son. I hold that shit in. I got this, right? What that means is that we're accustomed to internalizing our trauma. And then we know that if you don't process your emotions, they get stuck in the body. That creates disease, that creates tension, that creates stress, that creates stress eating. And hello?
Yeah, we're good.
Sorry. Yeah, and long story short, it's a bad deal for everyone.
Yeah. Wow. Those are some profound words. And yeah, thank you for that perspective. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to, that was a lot. And again, I think we could do another episode on that topic.
There's no time frame, man. We can edit. I don't mind talking. Just let me grab my charger real quick.
Okay.
All right, hold on. You know what? I got 20 seconds. Yeah. So my thing is, yeah, bro, like, honestly, it's love and it's a labor of love. But I guarantee you there was never a point in history where sobriety was trending, man.
Yeah.
So, like, whether it's white women drinking tea, looking real hot on Instagram, talking about sobriety, or it's Pop out there rapping and talking about it, or Chase, you doing it, sobriety's trending, man. Like what I don't like, that's crazy. That's so good. So we have to take the good and we have to take everything that we got and run with it, right? Because I'm never gonna alienate anyone. Like if you see someone, the only people I have beef with that people that try to piggyback off of recovery for financial reasons, and that's these recovery places that have terrible conditions. They don't really care about helping people, and they treat people like crap just to get them in the door. That's what I have a problem with. Everyone else, if you out there promoting recovery, kudos to you, and I love you.
So you have the Sober is Dope podcast. You just did a really, really good episode on Dry January, dropped some excellent knowledge. How else can we get in touch with you on social media, on the internet, etc.?
All right, so Sober, you can find me at Sober is Dope on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, at Sober is Dope. So you can find me there. You can also email me at support@soberisdope.com. You can find the Sober is Dope merch at soberisdope.net. And you can find us on YouTube. So we just launched our YouTube channel where we have over 200 episodes on recovery. We have a bunch of YouTube short videos. They're cool. There's a lot of interactive stuff where I'm bringing the beauty of recovery to you with actionable steps. And that's how you can find me. Sober is Dope is everywhere, or Google Sober is Dope. We'll come up. You can't miss it. And then you can find more information about me personally at popbuchanan.net.